review of our agenda today. We're doing welcome and introductions in the chat right now, as always, and we're very excited to have some representatives from the University of Texas, Austin, with us today, who are going to do a special presentation for us on some research that they've been doing, that they did with the city of Austin, and an ethics workshop that they have created as well. So we're very excited to have them on board with us today. They're going to be taking a big chunk of our meeting time today with the presentation, sort of getting their feedback or seeing what they've done with their research study. And then at the end, we'll open it up to any questions and answers session after they've delivered some content for us. So really looking forward to that. If there's time, we'll do a quick overview if anybody has any project updates, and we'll give Sahara a chance to talk about AI policy and adoption and follow up on ongoing actions. But I think the bulk of our time today will be hearing from Sharon and Aza.
Hey, I'm sharing some screens. I'm assuming you can see the presentation screen of the slides. Yes?
Yes, and just really
Yes.
quickly,
Great.
Sharon, before you get started, I wanted to mention that we had this team come back in March 20th of the year, and they had started this survey and came and gave us, some of you may remember, they came and gave us some preliminary findings from what they had done, and we asked if they would come back when they were done with the survey or their study. So this is the follow-up session. So if you weren't here during that initial presentation, it's great information, and I think you'll learn a lot today, and a lot of it will be useful for our work in the Readiness and Adoption Committee. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sharon Strover and Aza El-Masri.
Yeah, thank you very much. Aza and I and a postdoc who was working with us on this project, Bradley Move, spent several months working with the city of Austin in response to their request to develop some guidance and some training for the city as AI was clearly coming on. And joins many cities in trying to grapple with an AI policy and trying to figure out what it means for work at the city more generally. This work is sponsored both by an interdisciplinary research effort here at the university called Good Systems. Good Systems is a kind of big, sprawling effort with over 100 researchers, and then our research institute is called TIPI, the Technology and Information Policy Institute. But I thought I would start by by trying to, there we go, by giving you a little overview of what we're going to do today. We can go on and on about this work, so I'm going to try to be very, very narrow with it. And this is basically what we thought we would quickly talk about today. Just basic background on our work with the city, what our reporting ended up being, and what our approach was. We did some surveys, and I'm going to highlight just a few of the results of the surveys. And in speaking with Rich was especially interested in the workshops that we developed. So Asa is going to talk about the workshop structure and the goals, and share with you a little bit of the frameworks that we developed, which we called an ethics first approach. And then we'll finish up with a few of the use cases that we used in the context of our workshops. And happy to elaborate on any of this and all of this. Our approach in doing this work with the city is always to, well, take a look at what everybody else has done first. And to that end, we conducted a literature review to see what was out there in the way of AI and training, especially with respect to the workforce. And we didn't find a lot, as you'll see, with respect to the ethical angle that we were especially intent on. We actually did a LinkedIn learning assessment to see what LinkedIn had for training, because a lot of cities have access to LinkedIn. Then we did these surveys with two groups of workers. We did 5 workshops with over 100 people by the close of the summer. And on the basis of all that work, we developed some training slides that the city wanted to continue to train more people. And they also asked us, and you'll see why shortly, to develop a kind of very basic AI 101 video for them, along with a lot of ancillary materials that they could use in training. And then we wrote a rather large report, which is going to be publicly available as well. This work was all framed by a collaborative endeavor between the university and the city of Austin. We have an agreement to basically use the city and try to develop aspects of the city as a test bed for a lot of research projects. And we have a formal agreement that puts that into motion. So that turned out to be very helpful. And I think as both people at the university and people at the city are more aware of it and more comfortable with it, there are more opportunities to work together as well. So let me swing into what we found when phase one, this literature review that we did, when we looked at what a lot of researchers, both academic researchers and business researchers, had written about developing training in AI for a variety of endeavors. As I said before, we found ethics underemphasized, but we did find some consensus that they were essential. And I pulled this particular quote out because it nicely sort of summarized what those who did weigh in on the matter of ethics said. They said that they were really essential in part because there's more public awareness of the problems with data and technology. And it's always the problems that, of course, gather the headlines in newspapers and blogs and everywhere. So this particular quote highlighted that the key ethical concerns really need to be integrated into AI and technology training, because ethics shouldn't be sidelined into being defined as someone else's job. And this actually was a theme that came up in a lot of our workshop from the participants as well. So it sort of underscored the utility to us of what the literature said about ethics. There is a lot of literature on prompt engineering, as it turns out, but not nearly as much on how to think through some of the ethical questions. Our second step was really to take a look, as I said before, at what courses were available to people. And we looked at LinkedIn Learning in particular because a lot of folks have access in enterprise environments to LinkedIn Learning. And we also did employee surveys. So I'm not going to talk about the LinkedIn Learning, but other than to say that there is very pragmatic material on LinkedIn Learning. Once again, not all that much that focuses on an ethical approach. In our own work with the city of Austin, the city was keen to find out how people felt, how the employees felt about using AI, what some of their training preferences might be, what they knew, what they didn't know, and things like that. So we did 2 surveys, actually. One that targeted all city workers, and that survey went out to 16,000 people, and a much smaller one that went out to more data-centric folks. So that was a much smaller group. And it was people who were anticipated to be kind of in the vanguard of using AI in the city of Austin. And I thought I would just highlight a few of the findings here. We have a lot of other findings that are in an appendix in our big report. And as I said before, that report will be publicly available. But one of the first things we were interested in finding was simply how people felt about using technology more generally and the impact of technology on society. And we indeed found that among workers, they were generally fairly positive about the impact of technology in society. And that feeling turned out to be positively correlated with similarly positive feelings about the use of AI in city work specifically. That doesn't necessarily mean, however, that people were throwing caution to the winds at all. In fact, we were pretty reassured that people also felt that there were some potential problems and some issues with using AI that needed to be carefully tended to. When we looked at how familiar people were with AI tools, there was quite a bit of variation here. And you see on the left-hand side of this chart a lot of different kinds of AI types. And that's one of the problems of talking about AI. AI is not one thing. It's a lot of different things. And this chart arrays some of the typical things that are in that bundle of AI tools. There's many more that we could have included here. But it was illustrative to us that a lot of people were very familiar with things like Google Maps and using Siri and even transcription services like Otter AI and so forth. And so many people now use recommender systems such as those in effect on Spotify and YouTube. Other applications were less well known. Some of the things that are increasingly built in and embedded in other very common tools were less recognized as being AI tools. I think even since we did this survey, many of us who use search are increasingly finding AI as embedded in search. And indeed, that technology trend is just really taking off. So it's almost becoming more difficult to find common tools that don't have an AI component. But we were interested in whether or not people recognized the AI component here, and it was kind of mixed here. We were also interested in whether or not there was an age difference in terms of familiarity, which might with these tools, because that might have some bearing on the kind of training that the city engaged in. And indeed, we did find that younger people were much more familiar with AI tools. The green portion of the bar represents high familiarity here. And as you can see, younger people are much more familiar. That's not particularly concerning, but we highlighted it, and Austin in particular was sort of interested because the middle managers and the people who are expected to supervise the use of AI usually aren't the youngest people. They're usually a little bit older. So that may have some training repercussions down the line, and it may have some implications for how older people need to be approached with respect to training specific applications using AI. One thing that we found, and the city wasn't surprised, but they weren't entirely happy about this. People were already using AI at work. I say they weren't particularly happy about it because in our city's case, there were only a certain number of authorized licenses to use AI. And this group usually didn't have those authorized licenses for the most part, but people were already using AI for work purposes. We're at a moment, and I think this is probably true for many of our cities, where people are kind of finding their way. And if they see an AI tool that's really useful, they'll jump on it. That communication and reporting is the most common use of AI, is not too surprising. If you look at other business environments globally, that is the key AI use. That's the first thing. It's the lowest hanging fruit. Of course, large language models are really great for creating content. So also not too surprising that that's the second most common use, and then other uses were less often used. But clearly people we're testing the waters here. And then we asked people what they really wanted to be trained on and found that, in fact, people really wanted that basic introduction, and they wanted to know how very specific tasks related to their jobs could use AI. And that too has implications for how to design training. Safety was a critical issue to a number of the workers here. When we ask people about their use of AI potentially in their work, in their current work, they mostly said that only for only a few would it be very or extremely important. It was a kind of skewed distribution. A lot of people in the middle thought it might be slightly or moderately important. But when you ask people how likely they would be to use AI at work, the distribution moved over, and many, many more people anticipated actually using AI at work. So they weren't convinced that it was important now, but they all felt that it was coming and that their work would be, in fact, transformed. Some of the concerns that people exhibited, the biggest concern was lack of transparency in the models and this inability to really know and really understand what AI was delivering, and biases, of course. And many of us are very familiar with bias in training data, impacts on job security and impacts the ability to survey. Job productivity was somewhat concerning as well. And some people thought that AI could, and worried about AI replacing human judgment. When we turn to that smaller group of more data-centric people, one interesting finding that I thought you would be curious about is that, of course, AI is so new, most people don't have any formal training in it. And most people are finding their way and just figuring out what online course or what online source or podcast they can use to learn about AI. Blogs are fair game too. Very few had any university courses about this. It's just too new. Nevertheless, a lot of people in this smaller data-centric group were using AI at work frequently. Only 14% said that they had never used it. So if people at your workplace are already working with data, the chances are very good that they're already using AI in some way, shape, or form. So with that was a very quick sort of highlighting of some of the surveys. We're gonna move then to the workshop structure. And Aza is going to run through and share a few of the slides from the workshops that we developed for the city and ultimately produced as a slide deck for their training purposes.
Thank
So I'm going to
you.
turn it over to Aza.
Thank you, Dr. Strover, and hi, everybody. Just to quickly mention, I'm putting the link to our workshop material in the chat momentarily so that you can also access them and see them yourself. So here is the workshop structure that we've developed based on not only the literature, but also the surveys and the feedback that we'd received as we conducted the workshops little by little. Our workshop design incorporated a blend of theoretical and ethical instruction, followed by hands-on practice to maximize learning outcomes. So what that means is that we did dedicate some time to teaching or training participants on prompt engineering methods within an ethical AI or within an ethics first framework. And then later on in this presentation, I will show you what that looks like practically. We also iterated and created breakout groups in order to fulfill the goals that we had with regards to our workshops, we wanted to build a shared understanding of what AI does and what it cannot do. We wanted participants to understand the City of Austin's guidelines around AI use. A lot of the folks that we had that were participating in our workshops were not necessarily familiar with the policies and the guidelines that the City of Austin had put together in terms of AI use. We wanted also to allow participants to explore and apply the ethical considerations that we put together for government AI implementation. We also wanted them to learn what does effective prompt engineering look like, and how is it applied in your case and in your agency, in order, hopefully, our much larger goal was to create a community of practice around responsible AI. And so, next slide, please.
Yeah.
Our outcomes is the following. We conducted 5 workshops between March and July 2025, and these workshops were a mix of virtual and face-to-face workshops. A lot of the workshops that were happening that were face-to-face allowed us to really engage with a lot of the scenarios and to move around and to have discussions between different groups around ethical considerations. And so those were the ones that we'd seen a lot more participation than the virtual ones. We trained over 125 individuals across several agencies, and we also developed 2 formats or 2 types of workshops. One is what we call the basic workshop, which targeted general employees, and its focus was capacity building. And then we also conducted an advanced workshop, which was targeting agency directors and managers, in which we worked with them to develop a sort of ethical decision-making process and ethical decision-making thinking with regards to AI adoption and procurement, which we find is very important in order to, to go back at the very first slide from Dr. Strover's presentation, to really put the onus of responsibility on everybody. And to do that, we developed this ethics first approach, which positions responsibility and ethical consideration at the foundation for all AI implementation decisions. And so within this ethics first approach, we have 4 main pillars, and I'll go through them really quickly. First is what we call the values before tools pillar, where we emphasize the importance of evaluating AI through an ethical lens before learning implementation techniques. So this ensures that technological capacities and capabilities are grounded in public service values and citizen welfare considerations. Second is what we call the critical questioning pillar. And what we did through this pillar is develop the habit of asking, should we use AI before can we? This deliberate pause encourages thoughtful assessment of potential impacts rather than pursuing technological capabilities simply because they exist. And that was actually very helpful during the workshops. That came up constantly. And then third, we have a pillar we call contextual understanding, which allows us to move beyond just acknowledging bias, which is what we saw in the surveys, to actively engaging these participants in thinking about a multi-stakeholder approach to AI implementation and AI use in their use cases. So what this means is that we recognize that AI implementation in the public sector requires a consideration of diverse perspectives and understand that there are potential impacts across different community groups. And then finally, our 4th pillar is what we call the responsibility focus, that emphasizes accountability in both the use and creation of AI systems. And so this dual focus ensures that city staff understand their responsibility not only in how they deploy existing tools, but also in how they might influence the development of future applications. And then these 4 principles rest upon a comprehensive foundation of the ethical considerations that we've identified to be particularly critical in government applications of AI technology. And they also derive in part from the city's own AI resolution from as of spring 2025. And so just to move really quickly, these are the 7 ethical considerations that we worked around: accountability. And so we wanted them to ask the question, how should cities establish clear lines of responsibility when using AI tools? Privacy, what personal or sensitive data is being used or generated when using this AI tool? Safety, what safeguards are in place to prevent AI from providing dangerous information or instructions? Transparency, how should cities clearly communicate to stakeholders when and how AI is being used? Bias and hallucination, how might existing societal biases be reflected or amplified in the AI outputs? And then 6th, societal impacts, which we differentiate from the bias and hallucination to ask, are cities considering long-term implications of normalizing AI for whatever function? And then finally, we found it important to talk about environmental harms, to understand, to ask the question, how can cities balance efficiency gains against environmental costs? And so our use case scenarios were informed not only by the survey findings and our literature, but also in our understanding of each the participant group's proficiency levels, as well as the feedback that we had. So our use case scenarios were iterated and we developed them further and further as we did more and more workshops. And they were tailored to city guidance and promoted an ethics-first framework to AI use. And now we'll show you 2 examples, one for the basic one that we did for the basic workshop and another with the advanced team. So here's an example of an exercise we conducted in the general or basic workshop. As you can see, we developed scenario-based learning opportunities using the opportunity to teach them how to properly and ethically develop prompts crafted to reflect the actual challenges and opportunities city staff may encounter when implementing AI tools in their daily work. The breakout group format really helped us in creating the conditions for small team collaboration for these scenarios and encouraged peer learning and a lot of diverse ways of thinking about problem-solving approaches, all within couching it within a ethics-first approach. And then secondly, here's an example of our breakout groups that we conducted with the advanced team. We did 2 separate exercises. In the first activity, city leaders assessed AI gone wrong scenarios by applying the ethics-first approach and working through the 7 ethical considerations introduced in the workshop. Our scenarios were based on actual incidents that occurred in other cities. Like, for example, one of those scenarios had to do with the building of data centers in Black neighborhoods in Memphis, Tennessee, and the impact of these data centers on Black residents' health. In the second activity, participants built on their assessments of these unethical AI use cases to reflect on the ethics-first approach and discuss with their peers in city leadership what new use cases would be ethical and suitable to the needs of their respective departments. And then again, we have the link here, and I will share it again with all of our material that we are happy to share with you. This practical experience or this practical exercise, especially with directors and managers, was really helpful to see how thinking or how the thinking brainstorming process occurs, or how we can embed an ethics-first approach in implementing tech innovation or AI innovation within an agency. And with that, I think we are wrapping up our presentation, and we are looking forward to your questions and engaging with you more about these things.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much,
Thank you, Asa.
Dr. Stover and Aza, for this really great presentation. And I wanted to see if people wanted to had any questions or wanted to share any feedback to the University of Texas Austin team. Go ahead and raise your hand or unmute yourself or ask any questions you have.
My question is, and great study. Anything that really surprised you in your study? Anything that kind of jumped out and you said, "Wow, we didn't think that was what we expected"?
For me, we've talked about this a lot. The workshops really underscored the utility of the peer work. You know, larger cities like Austin really want to do as much online as possible because it just saves time and people want to work remote, et cetera, et cetera. But there was so much value in people talking to each other about alternatives and about how to navigate a certain problem in trying to use AI. That was somewhat surprising to me. Aza, do you have any thoughts? So, and I could go on about some of the data surprises too. Yeah.
I think what was interesting is that we had a really a big variation in terms of proficiency or even understanding, just knowing that ChatGPT exists. There were people that had never ever touched it, didn't know what it looked like, didn't know what it was. And it wasn't necessarily age dependent, but it was quite interesting that you had different types of, technology users, from the early adopters to the more skeptic folks. And we worked together, and that was the interesting part, seeing how they worked together to put together or think about the use case scenarios that we had developed with them.
I guess another surprise, and I'll end there because there's a couple more hands. And maybe it's not that surprising, but there were a lot of people at the managerial level, the supervisor level, who were supposed to be kind of, those are the people accountable for folks working in their group who are using AI. And one of the chains of command, of course, is if you have any doubts, ask your supervisor. Well, many of these supervisors felt very insecure about AI. So there's clearly kind of a leveling up that needed to happen, and people were a little anxious about it.
That's a really interesting feedback too, because we had somebody present a couple of sessions ago about developing a workforce development change management plan. And part of that plan was addressing performance issues and how you adequately supervise AI use and get skilled to supervise somebody that's using AI if you're not familiar with it. So I think that's a really, really important point for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick, you had your hand raised?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the great presentation. Just one question in reference to ethics and morals as being part of the existing culture, and then the culture that you're trying to kind of maybe change in that culture process. And I was putting AI aside and looking at governance, risk, and compliance, just that business piece and approach as it points to, and you clearly made the distinction in how you train, which I thought was brilliant, where we were targeting senior leadership and the board with governance, risk, and compliance. And then when we look at the risk management and risk mitigation pieces at the lower level of AI and look at it at the operational worker, task level, the first thing stuck out for me was, are we going to use, because most organizations, private and public, have a risk office and their focus and vehicle is governance, risk, and compliance. for executive staff and the board. And then the vision comes in with the operational team, and you have two different camps. But what I'm trying to get to is the culture change piece and how you target operational staff members, stakeholders, and then how you target senior leadership, executive, and the board. And is GRC, as I did the research when you did your presentation, the response I got back was yes. Ethics is part of the GRC Foundation. Do you agree with that? And do you, and I love again the way you did your use cases and scenarios, because that's exactly the way the federal GSA, and I have federal contracts, they want federal agencies to approach it based on enterprise architecture, use cases, and scenarios. So I'm just trying to figure out and sort out in my mind the approach and the vehicles that you're using to change culture as part of ethics, morals, or any other culture changing agent or concept that's being proposed as a result of artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, and automation.
It's a great question. It's a really big question. Especially when comfort, knowledge, and the ability to use AI well is not evenly distributed in, at least based on our research. And you're absolutely right. Leadership is often very interested in uses and familiar with the language of risk and familiar with the language of compliance as well. Obviously, I think we're in a time frame now when all of us and people in workplaces have to begin to recognize and communicate with different layers about exactly that, about the values and about the matter of risk. I actually have been working on something that I'm calling the risk of risk, because I think conventional risk frameworks don't entirely address some of the moral questions. They don't address them well. So I don't have a great response to your question, but I think you have aired something that a lot of people in large organizations have to begin to grapple with as they move AI into their operations.
Thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you. And Lyndon, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, thanks. I'm gonna go ahead and add my question into the chat thread, just so that people can read it. But and I'll recite it. I'm wondering if there's any research on whether LLMs may be inherently biased in analyses of structured and unstructured data, say for like public policy studies. And by bias, that could be, socioeconomic factors or racial factors. And I wonder if that's always going to be a function of poorly framed prompts, or could there be something that might be ingrained in the models irrespective of prompt structure?
Well, to the extent that the model is based on training data that itself is biased, yeah, the resulting model will be biased. And we actually are working with a computer vision engineer who's demonstrated exactly this and demonstrated very nicely how the introduction of additional data can shift models in one direction or another. And it just stands to reason that that can happen. Models they're not static. They keep absorbing more and more data. They're constantly changing. And it turns out they can be manipulated even with the introduction of certain kinds of data. So all the more reason for us, all of us as users, to be very cognizant of where some of the biases might be and how they play out in the context where we want to use the AI capabilities. I don't know if Aza, feel free to chime in whenever you want.
You said it all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Great. And are there any other questions? I don't see any more hands raised, but are there any more questions or comments that anybody has? Chris, I see you've got your hand raised.
Wonderful presentation, and this is great data for all us to all really think about and consider. And I did have one question. Were you focused more on like generative AI versus agentic AI or
Yeah. Yeah.
automated decision making? How did you break out defining AI when you started doing these surveys?
Yeah, well, when we did the surveys, we did not break them out. In fact, I don't think the survey ever even used agentic AI. We did talk about it in the workshops and differentiate it. And we might have used it with the advanced survey, with the so-called advanced group. Um, and indeed, in the training materials that we developed, our AI 101 video, we defined agentic AI because those are very different uses of AI. I think based on what the survey, when we asked people about familiarity and had some open-ended questions that I didn't get into at all today, and not very much in our written report yet, but people were mainly thinking of generative models, yeah, of large language models. Agentic AI, there's just less familiarity with it in the city of Austin workforce, at least. So that was really not on the table.
And a quick follow-up, do you have any plans on expanding and working on developing different use cases and different types of 101 training based on what kind of AI people are employing?
Well, it's interesting you ask that because this field changes so fast, it moves so fast. I can give you some quick updates. For example, Austin's put all this energy into developing a policy. Well, state government adopted a law over the summer that preempts cities from having policies in the state of Texas. I know California just adopted a law, what, today, yesterday? That I'm sure a lot of folks working in cities in California are scrutinizing very carefully. That was significant to us in particular because Austin is environmentally minded. Texas doesn't have a lot of water. We have a lot of heat. Energy is it's an issue here. And of course, with all the data centers popping up, many in the western part of the state, but really all over the state. That was really kind of ramping up a lot of the environmental considerations that the city was having. So these things change fast, and the scenarios that are most meaningful to people can change fast as well. I told the city after we had done this work that I thought the shelf life of a lot of this was probably only about a year, frankly, because I think things will keep changing. Now, an ethical framework, I hope, is more fundamental, but the actual operational aspects of working with AI are going to change. Right now, we don't have any particular plans. We had originally proposed to the city to have whole nother component to this study that would look at public engagement and how you can really use and involve people in what the city is using AI for so that they feel comfortable and knowledgeable and able to weigh in if they want to. And at the point that we did this work, the city said, no, we'd rather focus right now on our workforce and we'll deal with public engagement a little bit later. So, and I think that is happening this fall. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for the answer, Sharon, and all the complexities that you're bringing out in terms of how agencies are having to respond to the rapid shifts, for sure. I have a question about either anecdotally or do you have any post-workshop follow-up about how this has impacted? I know in some of the survey results you were showing there was some discomfort in different age groups, and is it making a difference? Is it making people feel like, having gone through the workshop, that they feel more comfortable in how they can approach it and get started thinking about using AI?
It's a great question. We got positive feedback in general on the to the workshops. I would love to go back, a few months now that it's been a few months to get another postmortem on that. That would be nice. I would like it. But we don't have that data yet.
Great. Okay. It'd be great and interesting to find out, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And I see a question from Eric in the chat. Is anyone studying about large language models bypassing official websites? Has this been a concern? Eric, do you mind sharing and asking that question and maybe clarifying?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so the question is, now that LLMs have become kind of replacement of Google search, there seems to be a lot of disintermediation between websites, and this includes official websites. And so is there any study or concern about, LLMs being the conduit of all information for the public to, government offices?
I did hear some anecdotal concern, not framed exactly like that, but about how cities can control information. We did some of our work and certainly we're interacting with the city a lot in the wake of this flooding disaster in Central Texas, which isn't too far from Austin, this area that flooded on the 4th of July. And there was a great deal of concern about very pressing, time-sensitive, disaster-related information. And it underscored for everybody how critical it was that there be a trusted source, that there be a trusted site in some way. And all things online are so good at amplifying rumors and misinformation that that your concern, your question did come up. Is there an answer to it? Not that I know of. No, not yet. But there is awareness and concern. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, great, thank you. And if there is any, I guess, group looking into this would be very useful, because I think
Yeah.
for many agencies, controlling how people get the data, and if they're bypassing the websites, which is where a lot of energy is being put into, and making sure that that's accurate, how do we ensure that the data, that people are getting is actually coming from there, in the
Exactly.
same wording?
Yeah, it's good. It's a good point.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. Any last questions before we conclude here? Not seeing any other hands, but feel free to ask while we have the time. All right. Again, Dr. Strover and Aza, thank you so much for coming today and sharing this information. There was a lot of exchange in the chat about getting access to materials, and we'll work to get that all organized when we send
We'll be
post-meeting
happy to
follow-up.
give it to you, and then it's your job.
That's right. That's right. And we're happy to distribute that, and we'll send it out in
Thanks.
our post-meeting follow-up. And also,
Thanks.
just a heads up, we've been talking with Dr. Strover about potentially delivering their workshop to coalition members. So I think she has expressed openness to that. So we're really looking forward to hopefully positioning the workshop that they've developed for our coalition membership here. So really looking forward to that as it evolves and gets organized. So thank you so much. And you're welcome back anytime to talk about any additional work that you're doing, and anything you think would be really impactful for our group. So thank you very much for your time today.
You're very welcome. Yeah.
We have just a few minutes left, and let me see where we are in our presentation. Just putting are there any groups that want to do a brief project update? You know, if you don't feel pressure, if you don't have anything, you know, we can move to the next. We can touch base on these in the next meeting, but if there's any immediate needs or updates that people have for their projects, I just wanted to open the floor to that in the last few minutes. And feel free to unmute and share if you want to check in on any of these elements that are on the screen. I'm not seeing anything, so we'll probably likely hold those. Sahar, I didn't know if you wanted to touch base on the policy adoption piece today.
Hi, Rich. Thank you. I I don't have any major updates, but hi everybody. My name is Seher Noor, and I provide support on policy adoption, or if you have any questions on how to get started or anything like that. I did have a group recently. I do have some additional requests, but if any of you still continue to be interested in, or like after you've gone through the website and seen what the coalition has, if you still have questions or like some additional help, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is given, and I'd be happy to help. Thanks, Rich.
Great. And if those of you that may have come in late, very early in the chat, Albert shared a link to the video, the orientation to the coalition that Sahara and I pulled together, and a starter guide for a quick intro. So we'll also share those in our post-meeting follow-up so that you have access to those outside of the meeting as well. So thanks, Sahara, for that. Oh, and thank you for reposting that, Albert. I just saw that. Really appreciate that. This sort of we do this at the end of every session, but there's, we encourage you to share your training materials with us if you've drafted anything or if you're working on anything. We keep those here in the AI education folder. So continue to send those our way. And also, if you're looking to develop a training and you don't want to start from scratch, in this folder, there are several starter decks for like explaining AI and providing some foundational information about AI. And we'll hopefully get some of the content that we saw today put into this space as well. We do have what we've called this AI education landscape, which is a tracking sheet of government-focused AI training. So we do have this, it's a spreadsheet that lists like who the audience is, whether it's free or it's costs, and it's sort of the main focus of the training tool. So that resource is always available. And I think at one point, a couple of meetings ago, some people had expressed interest in updating this and sort of also aligning it with the work that's done by the upskilling and in their collection of courses for the certification that they're looking into. So, we'll circle back at that, but if anybody has any interest about sort of updating this landscape, please send me an email. You can reply to the message that I send out in the post-meeting follow-up for my email there. But if anybody's interested, let me know. And then, we have a variety of projects circulating. We didn't do any project updates today, but most of we cycle through these, and we're always, if you're new here today, or if you're not sure what's going on, you can always jump into any of these committees and projects, and if anything seems interesting to you, and basically you can contribute to the level that you have time and availability. So you can be just sort of an editor and give feedback on things that other people are creating, or you can jump in and be a co-creator in some of these groups. So just continue to express your interest if there's a topic or a specific area that you'd like to get involved with, or if you don't see a project and you're interested in maybe pitching a project of something that this Readiness and Adoption Committee can move forward, also feel free to reach out about that. We like to hear new ideas and where there might be some energy and interest. So I think that's it today. We're coming up on the end, but definitely reach out to me, Sahar, Albert, if you have any questions or concerns about anything with the committee or can't get access to any of the links. And really appreciate your time today and being, giving the floor to our guest speakers today. So thank you very much. And I hope everybody has a great afternoon. And we will see you at the next meeting in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Rich.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye,
Sharon.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.